Good evening, families. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Miss Gael. I'm the parent coordinator. Tonight, we're hosting our workshop on mental health and parenting anxieties. We have tonight's workshop Miss Niro. She's a psychotherapist, podcast host of All Things Life, and expert on anxiety, brain science, and spirituality.
Thank you, Miss Gael. And I'm happy to be here. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And even though I can't see you right now, um, I would love for you to ask questions in the chat while I'm talking about the different topics that pertain to your kids and their mental health and how to keep them mentally healthy, and also your own anxiety, because our anxiety also affects our kids. So it's important that we know how to manage that as well. And as Gail said, I've been a psychotherapist for 18 years now, and I've treated mainly anxiety and relationship issues as well. A lot of times people only address their anxiety when it begins to affect their relationships, whether it's their partnership or kids. So I ended up doing a lot of relationship work too. About a year ago, I published a book. It's right there behind me. It's called This Book Won't Make You Happy. And it's about contentment, finding contentment. How do we find contentment? And a lot of the practices that actually make us feel more content also improve our mental health and physical health. So all of that went together in that book over there. And now what I do is a lot of television media. I do NBC News once a month at least. Actually, I did it this morning from home, and I talk about parenting and mental health on NBC News. And I also do the Today Show every 2 months. I'll be on there again on June 22nd. It's either June 22nd or a couple of days later. And oftentimes I talk about relationships and strengthening relationships there. So today we're going to be talking about how to raise mentally healthy kids. And this is a really tough time in the world to raise kids that are mentally healthy. There are a lot of big issues that they deal with in the world, from gun violence to gender identity to screens and cell phones, and how that impacts their mental health. And we do know that there is a correlation between the amount of time kids spend on cell phones and social media and their mental health. So for kids, it's tough. For parents, it's even harder, because it's hard to know, how do we help our kids when there are all these outside influences. But what I want to tell you today, and especially for many of you, your kids are young. For me, my kids are getting older. I'm going to show you a picture of my family in a minute, but your kids are young, so there's still a lot of time to do the right things for them. Even if your kids are as old as middle school, there's time. And that's what we need to know, because there's a lot of bad news in the world. And what I'm saying is there's also good news, and there are things that you can do that we know from the research helps to improve their mental health. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to just share my screen right now, so you'll be able to see my slides. All right. Miss Gail, can you see the slides?
Yes, we can see the
You
slide.
can see them. Okay, perfect. So we're going to talk about raising mentally healthy kids. And just so you know that, yes, I'm an expert, but I'm also a parent, and I make mistakes all the time. And the nice thing about being able to talk about this is you can learn from my mistakes before your kids get to my kids' age. This is my family. I'm going to show you. Let's see. There we go. So that's my husband. We are a biracial family. My husband is 100% Puerto Rican. We do call him the undercover brother, because you wouldn't know just by looking at him. And these are my kids. So my oldest is Natalia, who's right here. She is about to take her driving test tomorrow for the first time. So I will have a driver, which is a whole new level of parental anxiety. That's my son, Samuel. He is 14. And my two younger daughters, Sophia, who's right here, she just turned 12, and Carolina, who is 9 going on 27. So we all have one of those in the family. So it's a definitely a fun family. And what I will say to everyone who dreads having teenagers, I do love having teenagers. It's been really fun seeing their personalities develop and who they're going to be as adults. And especially if you do the work to connect with your kids young, if you talk with them, you have conversations with them, you spend time with them, this age gets easier. You're paving the way to have good relationships with them later. And my son is a trooper, being in a house with 4 women practically. So I'm sure he's building a cave somewhere to hide in the next few years. So why I showed you my family is just so you know that I'm in it with you. And there are many things that we know as experts, but you learn it differently as parents as you're going through it. I make a ton of mistakes. I follow my advice consistently, maybe 30% of the time, but I'm always trying to get back and do the right thing. So the first thing I want to talk about is what really impacts our mental health these days, and what impacts our mental health negatively. What it's important to know as parents is we can do everything we can for our kids, but if we don't take care of our mental health, that is going to affect our kids as well. So I would say start with you. A lot of times kids internalize our stress. They internalize how we deal with stress. And we often see depression, especially, passed down from generation to generation. We know women who have postpartum depression. We can see that 3 generations later. That's how powerful these generational illnesses are, not only from the nature, how we behave with the kids, the environment we create around the kids, but also there's genetic components to anxiety and depression. I've had anxiety my whole life. That's why I became an anxiety specialist. My father's had it, my grandfather's had it, but we can learn to do things differently, especially if you know there's a family history. It's really important that you take your mental health seriously. So what is creating these mental health issues in the world right now? What we know is 1 in 5 kids, I'm not even talking teenagers, have a mental health issue. We start to see it younger and younger. Suicidality now, we start seeing as young as 7 years old. So your kids are not far away from that age group. And some of you might have kids in that age group already. It's really important that we start paying attention to what we can do as a family to create an environment for them to grow up with good mental health. Stress, busyness, excessive focus on achievement and accomplishing. What my book was really about was how we're becoming more anxious as a culture every year because what we think of happiness is having more and doing more and being more. And if you look at any high school kid, you see the stress on them. Everything is about what am I going to be when I grow up? What am I going to do? What college am I going to get into? And that is creating this culture of anxiety. We often think that we'll be happier when, fill in the blank, when I get the house or the car, or maybe when I get married or when I have kids. And then maybe I want the bigger house. But that is actually called the arrival fallacy, because what we don't realize is when we get to that new level, there are going to be new challenges. You know, you get to the bigger house, all of a sudden you have more bills, you have to work harder. Maybe we have less time with the family. So, what my book was about was how do we actually find contentment? How I defined it in the book was if happiness is having everything we want, contentment is wanting everything we have. And part of that is really trying to be present in the moment. I can tell you this, if you have kids that are under 6 years old, those years go fast. And you know this, the days are really long, but the years go fast. I have 2 more years with my oldest child living at home. And I can't tell you how much that has flown by. So, as much as we can, we want to create moments. We're not going to be present all the time. We know that. But pick your moments where you say, I'm going to turn off the devices. I'm going to take the time off. I'm going to be focused at least for this 30 minutes to a half an hour on our family, on my child. And that will help you to make the most of this childhood that they have. I know it's stressful and I know there's a lot to do and you don't have much downtime. But even those small moments of the day make a difference. Miss Gael, was there a question? Nope, not yet. Okay.
No, sorry.
And feel free to ask the questions as we go along. Social media and devices, that's a whole other conversation. And if you go to my website, I do have a podcast on that, on when should we introduce social media, when should teens get cell phones. What we do know is there's a very clear correlation between social media and the decline of youth mental health. So now the recommendation is high school for social media. For cell phones, that can come at an earlier age, but it's really important that we look at what kind of devices we're giving our kids. They're devices that don't have social media on it, where kids can still communicate with you. And I strongly recommend that for under the high school age. But we're also looking at iPads, devices, screen time. Trust me, my kids grew up on screen time with two working parents. So there's no mom guilt, no dad guilt, no shame in that. But we also want to make sure that we know what they're watching. If they're on YouTube, there are often things that kids are exposed to on YouTube in the middle of programs that can be dangerous to their mental health and scary, and inappropriate sexual content as well. So we really need to monitor what they're watching. And I would say there is time limits on social media. We do see a correlation between kids who are on screens for more than 4 hours a day, with increased mental health issues. What it comes down to with devices, what I've seen in my practice is it creates disconnection when we have parents on devices all the time. My kids tell me all the time, get off my phone. My 9-year-old is standing right here. She's like, yes, get off your phone. It doesn't matter if I'm doing email on my phone or texting or whatever it might be, something important. They're just seeing me with my face in a screen. What I did was I got a flip phone, what I call my dumb phone, because this helps me to be more present. I don't have apps. It's super hard to send a text, so I actually don't want to be on it. I call it my dumb phone because I feel dumb using it. I'm like, how do I send a text? How do I enter a contact? But I took this phone on when I was on vacation. I'm going to try and use it on weekends. And what my kids told me at the end of it is, too much attention, mom. Please go back to your smartphone. You're paying way too much attention to us, because that's how distracting this is. We need more family connection in our families. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how we go about doing that. Third
Okay.
question, Gael?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
with social media, some parents are wondering cyber like bullying or just even other
Yep.
people having access to your children. Can you just touch a little bit on that part and how to assist with limiting that, or how do we prepare for that, or what are the signs to look out for?
That's a great question. I mean, when I can tell you when my kids are playing games, because that's a lot of times where you can have access to your kids, other people, strangers can have access to your kids. It's really important that you tell them you do not become friends, you do not play games with people you don't know personally. And it's important that you can also check in with them and see, who are you playing with? Who are you talking with? We don't do this with strangers in real life or on social media. And it's important that that you explain to them they can find your contact info. Oftentimes they can locate through different clues where you are, and they can show up. So this is about keeping you safe, not about not allowing you to have fun. It's about keeping you safe. Ask them who they're playing with on social media. When they are on actual social media, who are you friends with? Do you actually know this person? Make sure their profiles are private. This becomes more challenging as they get older, but it's important that we're involved in that process. As I said before, strongly advise no social media till kids are at least 13, but now with all the mental health data that's coming out, it's high school. So I think it's really important that we're involved in the games they play, because that happens earlier on, where they can share that information and make them aware that strangers are still strangers on social media. It's not just in real life. Did that answer the question, or was there any part of it I missed?
Nope, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. And if there's a follow-up question to that, please ask it. I'm happy to address whatever else is
Oh,
around that topic.
okay.
Okay. Um, so all right, how kids present with mental health issues, and this starts pretty young. So we're going to see pervasive worries, anxiety. They're going to a lot of times ask the same question. Mama, tell me what happens in this situation. What do I do when I go to school and this happens? They might be talking about the same things over and over again. That is the beginning of anxiety. Phobias are specifically about fears about certain things. Maybe it's about going to a certain place, whether it's school. It could be over a certain thing, like an animal. I've seen kids with different food phobias. They can be scared of certain locations. I used to have a phobia of elevators. I once made my uncle, aunt, parents climb 27 flights of stairs because I didn't want to get into an elevator. So that's very normal for kids. Airplanes can be a phobia for adults, not just kids. So we have to pay attention to what are they scared of and at what level is it impacting them doing their daily expected tasks in their life? Does it interfere with them going to places? Does it interfere with them going to school? That's when we need to get more help for these types of phobias. There's a great book, and I should have listed it on here as a resource for ages 6 to 12 called What to Do When You Worry Too Much. It's an anxiety workbook. It's cognitive behavioral therapy. That's the most effective therapy for anxiety. And it's broken down into like kid language. You can get it on Amazon. It's called What to Do If You Worry Too Much. So if your kids are presenting with some anxiety, that's a great workbook to start with, even before you seek professional help. You can start with a school counselor, but then a therapist can help you. And what I say with kids is once it starts affecting their daily life, get professional help. Because the sooner we intervene, the shorter that treatment is going to be, the sooner they get the tools to help them get better. Physical symptoms. Kids oftentimes are almost like dealing with a veterinarian deals with an animal because they can't express what they're actually worried about, but you may find headaches, stomach aches, dizziness, nightmares, sleep disturbances. These are all very common things for kids and phobias. Fear of the dark at night. That's a very common one that presents with anxiety. It may be other things that they're actually worried about, but it will come out in a certain situation. And it's important that we ask them about that. Tell me what you're thinking. What are some of the things that that keep you up at night, that prevent you from falling asleep? You know, are there things that you saw that were scary? Did anybody say anything scary to you? Did you see anything scary? Tell me about those things. Or is there just general questions? Is there anything worrying you today? Those check-ins are really good for kids. And that book has many, many different suggestions in terms of how to work with your kids around anxiety. Great techniques. I still remember, even as an anxiety specialist, this is where I'm going to show you that oftentimes I'm more a mom than an expert. One of my kids started kindergarten and she came home saying, I have headaches. I have headaches. And I get them on the bus. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, she has headaches. And my mom's a pediatrician. My sister's a pediatrician. We have lots of doctors in our family. And their first thought was take her to a neurologist. So I was thinking, okay, I'm going to take her to a neurologist. She has headaches. And I was sitting there, and the neurologist checked her, nothing wrong, and said to me, um, I think she has anxiety. And I was thinking, oh my God, please don't ask me what I do for a living. Don't ask me what I do for a living. And I thought, of course she has anxiety. She's just started kindergarten. She's in this bus for the first time. It's loud. There's lots of stimulation. She couldn't express that she was worried about it until I started asking about it, but it presented as headaches. So that's why those physical symptoms are really important to pay attention to. If a kid's going to the nurse every day, very likely anxiety, not necessarily a physical symptom. You had a question?
I have questions. Some parents want to know is certain symptoms or things to look at, like pulling out hair, biting fingernails, putting
Yeah.
things in their mouth. Are those some things too, are symptoms of anxiety?
They can be. So pulling out hair and eyebrows, any sort of hair, if that progresses to very constant behavior, that can be anxiety, but that also can be a symptom of a type of OCD disease called trichotillomania. So that specifically is anxiety that gets triggered, and that person starts to pull out their hair. I've seen patients pull out eyebrows. That's a little bit of a different kind of treatment than your typical anxiety, but biting on fingernails is very common for anxious behavior. I have a high schooler who I can spot on the swim team. You know, they're all wearing caps and goggles because right before her race, she's still biting her nails. So it happens under very specific situations for her, but for kids who are doing it all the time, we may want to investigate, you know, how are you feeling? Is there anything bothering you? Are there any situations that make you feel uncomfortable or any people you're around that make you feel uncomfortable? We can ask those pointed questions. So yes, definitely pay attention. All right. Um, let's look at what we can do about it. Now, this is the part where we're going to create an environment that is conducive to positive mental health. And these things are so important, not only at 3 years old, but at 23 years old. And I'm saying that because kids are always going to need their parents in some way or another. And especially the emotional piece of needing their parents, that continue. I still need it at 47 years old, you know? So, but especially in those young ages, empathy and active listening. So oftentimes we want to try and solve the problem. And your kids may be telling you things that make no sense, that they're lying, that you don't agree with. We don't have to empathize with what they're saying. We have to empathize with what they're feeling. So if a kid comes to you and tells you this big, very detailed lie, right? We don't have to say agree with them in terms of what they're saying, but we have to look at what are they feeling behind that story. You must be really frustrated. I'm sorry that today has been so difficult for you. You know, that must have been really hard for you. Or, oh my gosh, that's so exciting. I can tell that you're so excited. That is empathy. And we want to do that because what that tells the kid is we hear you, we see you, we understand you. And when they feel understood, then they begin to listen more to us. They begin to hear what they're saying. If they don't feel like we understand, if they don't feel like we're listening to them, they're not going to hear what you have to say. I often say to parents that as therapists, we say the same things you do. It's just they're hearing us because they know that we're listening to them. Um, so empathy is very big, and active listening, reflect what they're saying. If they tell you something, a good response is, okay, let me make sure I understand what you're saying. This is what I just heard. Is this how you're feeling? Right? Let's clarify that we understand what they're trying to communicate to us. 9 times out of 10, when you have teenagers, what they need more than anything else is that empathy. They need to be heard. And what I always say is kids need to be heard in order to hear. So empathy and active listening is big in terms of creating that connection with them and then being able to speak into their life, being able for them to be able to understand that, okay, we do have something to say and it's going to be for their benefit because we understand them. Affirmation. And I say as human beings, because oftentimes we affirm the good things that they do, right? Oh, you did great on that test, or great job at soccer, or you scored that goal, or, great job when they're doing something. And that is just perpetuating this culture of success and validation. In order to be worthy, you have to accomplish or achieve. What we want to do, especially when they're young, affirm them as human beings, not human doings. That was so kind of you, or that was so sweet, and you are such a big heart. Affirm the qualities that tell them you are inherently worthy without doing something. And what they say, experts say, 5-to-1 ratio, affirmation to criticism. To be honest with you, I would be lucky if I had a 1-to-1 ratio in this house some days. But what you want to say before you're going to yell at them for something, before you're going to criticize them, think to yourself, have I said anything positive to this child over the last few days? And criticism is oftentimes more received better if we can affirm what there is that's positive already. So, for example, my kid might come in, they might throw their bags and shoes and whatever all over the place, and I want them to pick it up. I might first say, okay, how was your day at school? Great, you got through today, and good job doing whatever it is they just told you about. Now we need to be picking up our bags and our shoes and our clothes and putting them in the right place. We don't want to go right in for the criticism. And oftentimes when kids are criticized constantly as adults, I will see them as adults in my office. And that critical voice of their parent or caregiver is the one they start criticizing themselves with as adults. It affects their self-esteem. So we want to be high on the affirmation and not making stuff up, things that really exist to affirm. We can absolutely affirm their accomplishments, but think about that. Affirm them as human beings, not human doings, and that will help you to kind of tailor to balance out that affirmation. We want to encourage personal responsibility, chores at a very young age. Believe it or not, this correlates to good mental health. And not just picking up your room, but what are you doing for the family? Are you helping to load a dishwasher or dry some dishes or put things away? Chores are really important. And there was a study out of Mississippi years ago that studied participants over 25 years. I believe it was, I don't remember how many participants, a good number for 25 years. And they showed the kids who started doing chores at earlier age that those kids achieved a higher level of success into adulthood. And it was that personal responsibility. We don't want to do everything for them. I know it takes more time to have them walk through and wipe the counters or do pick up the toys, but really hang in there and encourage them to do it. Even if you're doing hand over hand, here, let's pick up the toys together. That also correlates in mental health because it builds resilience and they learn they can do things for themselves. They don't feel helpless. These things correlate later on to stronger mental health. We talked about redefining success. We want to affirm effort, not just outcome. So it's not just, oh, you did a great job doing that, but you tried really hard. I know you tried really hard. I know you did your best today. And I know today was a hard day and you still did as best as you can. And that's going to change depending on how you feel, not just outcome. We don't want to just affirm the good grades or the good goals or whatever it is, but we want to affirm effort and redefine success. And also, acknowledge the things they do that are not validated outside. Kindness, any act of kindness, any act of generosity. We want to make a big deal over those things. I'm big on letting them fail and normalizing failure. And I often tell this story. It's actually on my Instagram. I'm on Instagram. I do a lot on Instagram, so you can follow me there. But my daughter, the older one who's about to take her driving test, failed her permit test the first time she took it. And I had called my husband as she was walking. She had called me on her cell phone to tell me she failed as she was walking out of the building. And I thought it was a joke because this child is a straight A student. Um, and I called my husband. I said, she failed. And he said, what? Are you kidding? And he said, I feel so bad. I said, no, you know what? It's okay. She needs to learn failure. And thank God it's something that doesn't have huge consequences. She can retake this permit test in a day. We need to teach them how to sit through those hard emotions. We need to teach them that it's okay to fail and they're going to fail. And now what do we do to work through failure? So she got in the car and I empathized. I said, I'm so sorry. I know this is so frustrating to you. And I know you probably feel a little embarrassed. And she said, I do. I can't believe I failed. I studied. And I said, you know what? But you have to own it. You're not the first person to fail. Own it. You're going to be able to take it again. And she thought for a minute and she kind of dried her tears a little bit. And then she took out her phone. I said, what are you doing? She goes, I'm posting my failure. I said, you're posting your failure. She said, yeah, the fans are waiting. So all of a sudden, what we did was we normalized the failure. We made it okay. And what happened is she started getting DMs from all these people. I failed my permit test too. I failed my permit test too. People who she never knew. She didn't know anybody failed her permit test. And now everybody talks about it in our circles of young people because she made it okay. She made it a joke. And now they come and ask her, what did you do what did you not do that I need to do to pass my test? We need more of that in the conversation to normalize failure because they're going to fail. We need to teach them how to work through it and know that they're still inherently worthy even when that happens. All right. I'm going to talk about sleep because a big thing that I'm telling you at this age, and I know when you have newborns, it's so hard. I did all the sleep training. My sister just had a baby. She's 3 months old. And I'm like, I could never go back there. It's exhausting, but we need to guard their sleep. This is just the guideline for sleep. Newborns to 1 year, 16 hours of sleep a night. Good luck with that. Okay. But do your best. Toddlers to 2 years old, 11 to 14 hours. Preschoolers to around 3 years old to 10 to 13 hours a night. School age kids need 9 to 11 hours a night up till about 13. And then once they're teenagers, it's 8 to 10 hours a night. And even that is hard to get. And sleep and mental health, huge correlation. And I will tell you, when they have devices, iPads, get them out of the rooms at night. We don't need them there. We don't even need our phones in our rooms at night. Get an old school alarm clock for your kids, for yourself. Notifications trigger dopamine in the brain. And oftentimes with teenagers, they're getting notifications all night. Even kids with iPads, they're getting notifications. My kids know no devices in their rooms at night. My teenagers still have, the older two have their phones in the room. I'm still working on that. But the younger ones, all devices are out. I've had kids come over for sleepovers, young kids, and I tell them, give me your iPads. They bring their iPads for sleepovers. I'm like, your iPads, my rules in my house. And they respect that. Okay, Mrs. Feliciano, I'll tell you where I'm going to charge it. So when you wake up at the crack of dawn and you need it, like it's cocaine, you'll know where it is, you know? So but they respect that. And we need to guard their sleep because there are a lot of things that happen at the night when they're sleeping. The restorative processes in your brain. Like I said, sleep and mental health go hand in hand. We know kids who don't sleep have higher incidences of anxiety, depression, and even suicidality later on. So it is serious. There's also specific hormones that get produced while they sleep, including growth hormone that we need for longevity of cells, but also just for growing. So it's important that kids, we guard their sleep as much as we can. There's a lot of things that come at them for mental health that we don't have control over. This one we can have control over. Set those rules early on and continue them later on. I wish I had this talk when my kids were little because I would have done things differently. What I know now is very different than what I knew back then. And we're also too busy to kind of really research and read all the books when the kids are young. So please revisit this talk when it's posted. These are the other times. So guard their sleep. What else can we do about their mental health? Encourage time with friends, face-to-face time. Play dates are so important. And I'll tell you why. Because once kids get a little bit busier, a little older, they're so scheduled. They're overscheduled. They don't have time for unstructured play. And what they learn in that unstructured play is how to read facial cues, social cues. That's where they develop empathy. We know from certain studies that kids are getting more narcissistic and less empathic. We have ways to quantify that because of the lack of one-on-one FaceTime connection, not FaceTime on a screen, in person. So whatever you can do to get them in person with people, even if it's, once a week or once a month or on weekends, really important that we do that and that we don't interfere in their play date. Don't plan super high tech projects on their play date. I always say I invite kids over so I don't have to play with my kids. I'm not going to play with yours. So let them play, let them figure it out, let them solve their problems. Don't entertain them all the time. One-on-one time with you is so important because when you take away their screens, what are they going to want? You. They're going to want you. So, mommy. And even now, I just told my kids, they're older, as I said, 16, 14, 12, and 9. I have always done one-on-one dates with them. And they haven't been that consistent, but especially if you have many kids, and I know this is so hard, it's important to make that one-on-one time because that's when they talk to you. So, what I said to them was, I'm going to schedule one date with each child once a month. And that's going to be far more than I've ever done consistently. But now I'm aware that my time with them is coming to an end. Once they hit high school, it's like, oh, I want to hold on. And now that when they have their license and they're out the door. So, and then it has to be on their terms. What do you want to do? I mean, I remember the days when my daughter was like, I want to go to Dunkin' Donuts and get a donut. And we'd go and get a donut. We'd just sit there and we talk for even 20 minutes, and that was meaningful to her. So ask, what do they want to do? Do we want to go to a park together? Do we want to take a walk? Do we even want to watch a movie and maybe just have a little conversation before and after? So those things are really meaningful. I know you have to be intentional because you're so busy to get those done, but that's important to do. The one-on-one time. Teach them gratitude. Huge. Gratitude is a direct pathway to resilience. And I'm going to tell you why. Because our brains are wired to take in the negative. There's something called a negativity bias. I wrote about it in my book. And it is an evolutionary mechanism because when we were, in the forests and fields, we needed to be aware of predators. So our brains are designed, they've evolved to scan for the negative. It's also why we can remember criticism far more than compliments. We could be complimented 20 times and we'll hear one criticism and that's what we'll walk away from. Our brains are wired to take that in. But if we practice gratitude, and I say practice because being grateful can be a feeling, but gratitude is a practice, we can change our brains to scan the environment for positive. You can take a negative person who practices gratitude by writing down or talking about 3 things a day, and they can become more of a positive person neurologically. We've seen research on that. So what I do with my kids, whether we're walking around, on a weekend or sitting around a dinner table, is I say, give me 3 good things a day. You can say 3 good things you're grateful for, but 3 good things a day helps them to kind of look at what was good in the world. And now they're used to it. We do it when we have free time. Sometimes they use it against me. At first they get annoyed by this, but now they use it against me when I'm about to yell at them for something like who left their shoes on the stairs. That they're like, Mama, give me 3 good things. Give me 3 good things. So They will, but it shows that they're getting it. And then when they come to challenges in their life, instead of being so weighed down by the negative, you've taught them how to look for what's positive. You taught them to say, okay, you know what, it could be worse. I still have this. There's still blessing in my life. And that starts really young. So start that young. Encourage service, giving back. Never too young to volunteer. And it's a wonderful thing to do as a family if you can volunteer together. We do a Thanksgiving volunteer project. I'm trying to do more service opportunities with them, visiting people, bringing them food, working in soup kitchens and those types of things. And I'm always amazed that over the holidays, what they remember are those opportunities. I can ask them, what gifts did you get 3 years ago? They don't remember, but they will remember when we visited a family. They will remember when we dropped off Thanksgiving dinner. They'll remember when we brought food to someone whose mom was going through chemo. That's the stuff that sits with them because we were wired to give back. And what we know when we give back, and especially when it involves in-person connection, is that it releases three mood elevating neurochemicals in your brain that promote happiness. Dopamine, which is new happiness, new pleasure, the things we look forward to. Serotonin, which is a mood elevator, it makes us happier. And oxytocin, that's the hormone we experience when we're in love. So volunteering really does that. Find things that you can do together as a family. That's huge. And start that young so they see how important that is. I wanted to talk about this one study that came out really recently. We talked about it on NBC News, and that was the presence of and faith, prayer, or meditation, any type of faith, prayer, meditation. And for a long time, we knew that it affected the mental health of adults, but we're seeing it now in adolescents. And I know oftentimes people leave their faith traditions when you're growing up and when you're in adulthood. And I've often seen people come back to it when they're raising kids because they think about, oh, I haven't done this in a long time, but I want my kids to grow up in it. I just want to show you some of the research around that particular study. What they did was they followed 5,000 kids and teens for anywhere between 8 to 14 years. And what they saw was regular weekly church attendance or regular prayer or meditation resulted in 18% happier people in their 20s, 30% more likely to do volunteer work, 33% less likely to use drugs, 30% less likely to have sex at a younger age, 40% less likely to have sexually transmitted infection. And we also saw correlations with lower incidence of depression and anxiety symptoms. And what the study showed was if it was less than a week, less than weekly church attendance, there was no significant benefit. It was the same as if they had no regular prayer, regular church attendance. So it was really weekly. But if someone had a regular practice of prayer or meditation, and meditation, we know, I wrote a whole chapter in my book about it, what it does for us in terms of mental health and the ability to be present and experience your life. If any of those things were regular, we also saw the same benefits. So for us, we have since COVID, we have not attended church regularly, but prayer is a part of our life. Bedtime prayers before bedtime, dinner time prayers before dinner time, any sort of prayer ritual or meditative ritual. I know people who do yoga with their kids. They sit, they breathe, relaxation, breathing. All of these result in greater mental health. And right now in the world we're in, we need as many tools as we can to deal with the mental health crisis that we're facing. So this was one study that came out really recently that I wanted to highlight for you. Parental anxiety. This is huge. And I'm going to go through this fairly quickly, but generally with anxiety, it lives in the future or it lives in the past. It's not in the present. Because if I ask my patients who have anxiety, do you have to figure this out right now? Is this a problem that you need to deal with right now? It's not. It's our mind living in the worst case scenario, right? And what's important, especially when you're sending kids to school, when you're sending kids out in the world is scary. Every day it's scary when you're sending your kids. We live 20 minutes from Sandy Hook. That was the biggest massacre there was. And it happened when my daughter started preschool. So we've lived with that in our memory. And we know people who've lost children in that. It's easy to be anxious as a parent, but beware of worst case scenarios. Think about, is this the norm or is this an extreme? What's the best case scenario? What are other possible scenarios besides the worst case? it's important that we are aware of when our mind goes to the worst case and actually think about the probability of that happening. When we stay in the present, what happened today? You know, are my kids okay today? Are they safe today? You know, did they have a good day? Do I have to deal with this problem today, or do I need this answer today? Oftentimes we can bring down our anxiety. Focus on what you can control. I often have my clients make two columns. What can you control in this situation? What can you not control? That side we have to let go. If you're a person of faith, we say let go and let God. But in this side, what we can control is where we need to put our mind on. What I like to say is find like-minded parents for support and take this cue all through high school. Because when you're telling your kids, no, you can't do that, um, they're going to say, everybody does this, every kid does this. And you're going to say, no, I know this parent doesn't too. I'm South Asian. I know all the Indian moms because we're strict. So when my daughter's like, everybody's doing this, I'm like, no, ask her mom because I know her mom thinks like me. We need that backup as parents and people who parent like us as reinforcement as we're raising our kids with the rules we think are going to best serve them. So, and especially if your anxiety is getting in the way of you living your life, get help for it because anxiety does transmit to children. If we are so anxious, if we're always criticizing our kids, if we always live with this anxious feeling, your kids will internalize that. I often see children or adolescents whose parents had anxiety that went unchecked. So that's really important. It goes back to taking care of your own mental health and your own self-care. I don't have time to talk about self-care right now, but I am talking about self-care on the Today Show in June. So you can check out that segment. I'll send it to you guys when we do it. So important when you're raising kids, even to make 15 minutes of self-care every couple days, that can make a difference. So, and I can take any questions on anxiety as well. This is where you can connect with me. This is my book. This book will make you happy, and it's about finding contentment in life, wanting what you already have, which we know we do have a lot if we choose to focus on it. That's my website. I do have a newsletter that goes out every 2 weeks that gives you tips and ways to live more intentionally and connect with the people around you. I do have a blog on Psychology Today. I wouldn't recommend reading it right now because I've neglected it for 8 months, but it will be up and running soon. I always say as a working mom, you can have all the things, but you can't have them all at once. It's hard to kill it at home and kill it at work and crush all of it. You know, you have to pick and choose what you can do and what's aligned with your own mental health. But I do have a podcast called All Things Life, and you can connect with me on Instagram as well.